Welcome back to part 2 of Module 3, Understanding Behaviour and Using Prevent, Teach, Reinforce Logic to support children to use more effective behaviours. So functional behaviour assessment is underpinned by the idea that all behaviour is the person's best attempt to get their needs met. And we must use that to underlie all of our interventions. They're all about helping the person to get their needs met in a way that works better, more effectively for them and for everyone else. One thing we often do is ask children, why did you do that? As if they know and could tell us. And very often that's not helpful. We get the blank stare. So what we need to do, instead of trying to stop challenging behaviour, is to focus on teaching children what to do instead of the challenging behaviour. It is really unethical for us to try and stop a behaviour, because remember, all behaviour is the person's best attempt to get their needs met. It's especially unethical for us to just try and stop someone doing something if they don't have the verbal communication skills to get their needs met, if they can't ask us for what they want, which is very often the case, perhaps with little children or perhaps with individuals with disability. So instead of trying to stop someone or force them to do something different, all we can do is try and teach the person a better way to get their needs met and make sure it works. We have to make sure that what we're offering the person as a reinforcer is a way to get their needs met, and that it's matched to the function to help them to either get or avoid whatever it is that is the function of their behaviour. So let's continue using the handout that you've got your assessment on, and let's get into how we're going to do intervention using the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce structure. This Prevent, Teach, Reinforce structure is a really evidence-based, well-informed approach to teach the child that better way to get their needs met. I'd really strongly advise everybody to buy a copy of this book because it's fantastic, particularly the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for young children. It is specifically for children in early childhood services. So I don't get any money for recommending the book. I just recommend it because I think the authors are fantastic and this is a wonderful resource, and we are very grateful to how much they share generously and put online that we can access. So if everyone can buy a copy of their book, I think that would be a really good thing to do to honour the outstanding work that they've done. The first thing that we must do in a behaviour intervention plan is to define a replacement behaviour. What we want the child to do instead of what they're currently doing to try and get their needs met. And this replacement behaviour is the basis for our entire intervention plan. So it's really, really critical that we define this and define it clearly. What do we want the kid to do instead? So this is Joel. Remember Joel from our assessment example, who had the problem behaviour of hitting teachers and peers with an open hand. They decided they wanted him to really increase a whole heap of behaviours, using his words, following directions, sharing with peers. That's too much to try and do all of those things at once. It is much better to focus on just one target behaviour at a time. They want him to participate in undesired classroom activities. In my language, we want Joel to do some activities even if he doesn't want to do them. What they've done in the operational definition is make a really clear replacement behaviour. When presented with a non-preferred activity, something he doesn't want to do, Joel will participate for 2 minutes. I love that they've got the time on there, because if we just say Joel will participate, for some people that means have a go for 10 seconds, and for some people that means I want 30 minutes of sustained work out of you. So if we define it really clearly to how many minutes we want him to participate for, makes it easier for us to all be consistent in reinforcing that behaviour when we see it. So I'd like you to start by considering, what would you like your child to do instead of the current problem behaviour? I really want you to avoid the word stop. So if they're currently hitting to try and get other kids to go away, if we write don't hit, that's going to be really hard for us to reward, for us to reinforce. So we want to use a do instruction instead. So we might have the child flash a go away card, for example, rather than doing the hitting behaviour. But take out the word stop and get them to focus on something that you want them to start doing instead. I'd like you to spend 5 minutes here with your partner. I'll get you to press pause and define your replacement behaviour. What would you like this child to start doing instead that you can then teach them to do and reinforce them for doing? So press pause on the video now for 5 minutes. Well done. Hopefully you've all defined a nice clear replacement behaviour for your child to start doing instead. Once we've worked out what we want the child to do, then we're going to use prevent, teach, reinforce. We're going to prevent the problem behaviour from happening by changing our environment. We're going to teach them what we want them to do instead, and we're going to reinforce them by helping them get their needs met. We're going to start with prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Anything that we can do to change our environment to prevent the problem behaviour from happening is going to make our lives so much better, our child that we're supporting's lives so much better, and the lives of the other children in our service much better as well. So this is a really valuable time to invest your energy. One thing that we will come back to is the foundations of positive behaviour support. Do we have clear expectations? Have we taught the children what to do? And are we using lots and lots of encouragement at that 4-to-1 ratio as an absolute minimum to encourage our kids to use these appropriate behaviours instead? This is really well worthwhile going back and doing a little bit of an environmental analysis and considering which of these things do we have in there and which of these things do we need to add some more in there. When you're considering what you can do in your prevention plan, there are a number of strategies that you can use. You can provide choices, a this or a that. We can also intersperse difficult tasks or things the kid doesn't like doing with easy or preferred tasks. We can use visual supports and schedules, things like first and then charts. They can be really, really helpful. Embed preferences, enhance predictability, change the physical arrangement of the classroom. Something as simple as moving where the adults are or moving where the furniture is can prevent a great number of problems. So it's really worth thinking about, could we physically move any stuff around? If we have triggers for challenging behaviours, can we remove them? So for example, if we have a really loud siren and the child gets upset when that siren goes, do we really need to have that siren? Showing positive attention in a 5-to-1 ratio is critical that we do this for all children, but especially children with problem behaviours. And we also need to include teaching as part of our prevention. So I want you to press pause on the video now, and for 5 minutes, plan with a partner, what can you do to prevent the problem behaviour that you defined in the B for behaviour? What can you change to prevent that from happening? Press pause now. All right, thank you. Hopefully that has given you some time to plan some prevention strategies. What prevention strategies can you actually use to prevent problem behaviours from occurring? A little bit of a reminder about our behaviour support plan or our prevent, teach, reinforce plan. When we prevent the problem, we're looking to change what the adults do. When we're teaching the child a better way to behave, we're going to change what we as the adults do and do some active teaching. When we reinforce the better way so that the child is able to get their needs met, we need to change what we as the adults do. A behaviour support plan, a prevent, teach, reinforce plan is not a plan for what the child will do. This is a plan for what we as the adults who are supporting that child are going to do to help them to get their needs met. So really important, if you've got stuff about what the kid will do, change it to what are the adults going to do to help the child be more successful with those behaviours. So teaching is the next strategy. We need to teach the child what we want them to do instead. We need to actively and explicitly teach the replacement behaviour. This is good news because this is what we do. We're educators, educating kids to do a whole heap of different things. We're going to specifically educate the child. How do we do this particular behaviour that we want you to do instead? There's a long menu of teaching strategies that you can use that teach communication skills, peer social skills, self-monitoring, using visual schedules, heaps and heaps of things that you can do. But your fundamental thing is I want to teach the child what I want them to do instead. I want to teach the child the replacement behaviour that I've defined as the thing they need to do to be successful. So I'd like you to press pause now and spend 5 minutes planning with the person next to you. What are you going to teach? When are you going to teach it? And how are you going to teach that child? Be really specific about the what and the when. Press pause for 5 minutes. All right, thank you for adding to your planning document with your teaching time. I wanted to bring up this slide about fluency and how long it might take a child to learn a new behaviour. So we have this quote here from Harry Wong that for a child to learn something new, we need to do it on average at least 8 times. But for a child to unlearn an old behaviour, which is what we want in this case, we want them to unlearn the problem behaviour that has been working for them to get their needs met, and we want them to replace it with the new behaviour that we want them to do. The new behaviour must be repeated and must work for that child at least 28 times. So if you find that you teach your child to do this and it doesn't work the first time, that's okay. We've got another 27 goes at teaching this kid and helping them to get their needs met with this new way before we can say, oh, hang on, okay, something's not right here. So lots and lots of repetition is required for kids to become fluent at the new behaviour that we want them to be performing. So you should have had time to plan how you can teach the replacement behaviour formally in direct lessons and informally with lots of reinforcement and incidental teaching, but also in different ways and in different contexts so that the kid learns to use that new replacement behaviour not just in this one setting but in lots of different settings so they can be more successful at getting their needs met in a variety of settings. The next thing we're going to plan for is the reinforcement that we're going to use. And it is absolutely critical that we reinforce children with helping them to get their needs met. It must be linked to the function. This is one of the ways why sticker charts can lose their effectiveness is often we will have children that want something like, let's say, peer attention. We ask them to do a replacement behaviour and then we reward them with stickers. Now the kid will definitely take our stickers, or if we're giving lollies, they'll definitely take our lollies, but that's not what they really need. It's not the function of their behaviour. So we need to figure out a way, so they'll take it to start with, but then they'll get kind of sick of it after a few days. So that's why people say, oh, the sticker chart worked, but then it stopped working. When it's novel and exciting, kids will be interested in it, but in order for it to maintain effectiveness, we need to help the child to get their needs met. So if a child wants to get attention from adults, we need to teach them a new behaviour that allows them to get attention from adults. If they want to get away from peer attention or avoid peer attention, we need to teach them a better way to get away from peer attention. If they want to get access to a preferred tangible, like a preferred activity like the iPad, and they're currently using punching behaviour to get that, then we need to teach them a better way to get that iPad. We can dose things like tangibles somewhat selectively. Things like attention we cannot dose selectively. That is, if a child needs adult attention, they need adult attention. It's a really basic human need. Same with kids that are doing things to get or avoid sensory stimulation. If a child is really, really bothered and upset by loud noises, teaching them to just tolerate loud noises is not going to be a workable strategy. We need to understand that that's a really deep need for them and make sure we make plans for that. So if a kid needs to be touching things all the time, we provide stimulation and sensory tools for them to do that. But tangibles like the iPad, we can be somewhat selective with what time of day and for how long they get access to those particular reinforcers. But the key message is that attention connection is a really fundamental human need that we must provide children with access to human connection. So I want you to go, I'll give you a bit of planning time in a second, but I want you to remember Joel, remember the child who was hitting peers or adults with an open hand? They figured the function of his behaviour was to get attention from adults. So he got reprimands, redirects, and was talked to about what happened and told what the rule was. There's no such thing as positive attention and negative attention. There's no such thing as good attention and bad attention. There's just attention. So he was doing this hitting behaviour and he was getting attention from adults. So have a look at his plan. His prevent, teach, reinforce plan is reinforcement is give attention as much as humanly possible. Give specific praise when you're teaching, and when you're teaching that behaviour and when you observe it in your teaching setting, and then give loads and loads of that positive adult attention whenever he does the desired behaviour. When you look at the challenging behaviour, they have removed some of their attention from the challenging behaviour. When he belts other kids, they're not just going to ignore it when he belts other kids or adults, but they're not going to have a big long conversation with him then at that time. They're going to redirect and use as little attention as possible because they're going to transfer that attention, which he desperately needs. It's not optional. He needs that attention. They're going to give it to him in spades when he does the replacement behaviour. So whenever he does the right thing, he's going to get all of that attention, all of that connection that he really desperately needs. So this is what we want to see in your prevent, teach, reinforce. We change the environment. In prevention, we teach the child what we want them to do instead and give them really specific feedback, and then we reinforce by making sure that this new behaviour allows the child to get their needs met in an efficient way. So I want you to go into planning time now with your partner. Reinforcement, how can you help your child to get their needs met in a really efficient, effective way? Press pause on the video now for 5 minutes. Okay, hopefully now you all have an assessment, a functional behaviour assessment, which allows us to form a hypothesis about why the problem behaviour is occurring. We've defined what we want the child to do instead, and we've developed an intervention plan for what the adults are going to do differently, how the adults are going to prevent problems by changing the environment, how the adults are going to teach the replacement behaviour, and how the adults are going to reinforce the replacement behaviour by helping the child to get their needs met. So I'd like you to do a group share now. I'd like you to press pause on the video and take turns to go around the group and share your whole plan from the problem behaviour sequence to the prevent, teach, reinforce plan. So another question that might be asked, now that you've shared your plans, is how will we tell that this is working? So this is an example from the Prevent, Teach, Reinforce book, which I still recommend you all buy, of a behaviour rating scale. So the way this works is we choose a start time and an end time for the intervention. Should just be a couple of weeks to start with. We get some measure of the frequency of the problem behaviour at the start of the intervention. In this example, you can see that this child was doing hitting 8 or more times per day at the start of the intervention. And then we track how frequent is that behaviour as we use the intervention. And you can see by the time they've got to the intervention, which I think is 3 weeks in this case, the child is doing hitting behaviour 0 to 1 times per day. So that means everybody's day has gotten a whole lot better. So we want to have some sort of a way of tracking and measuring, is this working? Is this getting the results that we want for the children that we're supporting? So consider for a minute, what could you use as your behaviour frequency scale? How could you collect that data to determine, is our intervention plan actually working? So hopefully you've been able to consider how you will tell if your behaviour intervention plan is working and what data collection methods you'll use. They can be just observations, they can be frequency data, whatever is the best fit for you. So that is Prevent, Teach, Reinforce planning. That's the structure that we use for supporting children to be more successful in their behaviour at Tier 3, which is individual needs. I wanted to bring up these resources for you because they're fantastic sources of resources for prevention, for teaching and for understanding function and reinforcement. The Centre on the Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning is a rich treasure trove of resources that you can use at all 3 tiers. And the Centre for Evidence-Based Practices, which is challengingbehaviour.org, their resource library has so many wonderful things that you can just download and print out. They also have the author of Prevent, Teach, Reinforce for Young Children, Greg Dunlap. He is on there doing an hour-long webinar which has been recorded, so you can watch him teach about Prevent, Teach, Reinforce. It's a really fantastic resource and I encourage you all to use it. So thank you so much for your time today. I hope these resources are useful and helpful for you, and I wish you all the very best in supporting young children with challenging behaviours to be more successful.